Downward Dog: Why Dog-Faced Men Frequent Your Property. An original short story by Jared I. McGee. Just in from the people that brought you Dybbuk's and You, a practical how-to guide, comes Downward Dog: Why Dog-Faced Men Frequent Your Property. If you are reading through or listening to this guide, chances are you or someone you love has recently come into contact with or has a property that is being plagued by a dog-faced man. We here at Pensive Press are happy to provide this first introductory chapter of the guide, Downward Dog: Why Dog-Faced Men Frequent Your Property, for free in both text and audio form. If you do enjoy this chapter and wish to continue on in the book, simply order through your preferred service via the links at the end of this e-reader or those linked to the audio file which you have obviously downloaded. Before we move ever forward, readers and listeners should take a long, deep draw of breath. That dog-faced man that's frequenting your place of business, your homestead, your garden, your backyard, he's not there because of any fault of your own. You see, the cynocephaly, a misnomer of a moniker for these beings to be sure, as they are not simply, quote, diseased in or of the head, unquote, as the Greek term would have us believe, are an ancient race that have lived alongside humans for millennia. Whether it's the halls of Memphis, the pillars of Sparta, the dunes of Bahariya, or the pyramids of Tikal, all ancient peoples were fully aware of dog-faced men. Even the early Christian church and Islamic theologians recognized and documented the dog-faced men. Though, just for clarity's sake, you should be mindful that dog-faced and dog-headed men are one and the same. A cynocephalus is a cynocephalus, after all. Firstly and foremostly, throwing any sort of raw or rare meat out is a no-no. The easiest, most common, and most diagnosable of all reasons a dog-faced man is visiting your property is the presence of raw or rare meat. Even the earliest accounts of these creatures demonstrates a near-complete subsistence on a diet of raw meat. Just as one does not toss or leave out food at a campground for fear of bears or other more base beasties, discarding raw or rare meat just cannot occur if dog-faced men are about. That goes for trash cans too. Discard small scraps through a garbage disposal. Discard large chunks or major leftovers in places far from your home. Secondly, if you have any dark enclosed spaces that are not often used and or aired out, this might be a reason for your dog-faced man or men. The cynocephaly love caves and, in the event that they cannot find a nice singular cave, or even better, a system of caves, any hole, barn, sugar shack, basement, or even extra unused wing of a house will do. The darker and danker, the better. One sign to keep an eye out for are the large patches of grass or leaves missing from the flora around the suspected area where the dog-faced man or men might be holing up. The cynocephaly prefer to make beds out of grass and or leaves, and they are known to strip large portions of the verdant areas around their dens. Another obvious means of determining whether or not you have a dog-faced man on or near your property is the smell. Most dog-faced men bathe once a month for religious or cultural purposes, or do not bathe at all. Rather, they ritually baptize themselves once a week with a special oil made of milk. Of course, the stench coming from this lack of bathing with water and this abundance of bathing milk that will inevitably spoil when it is not washed off is overwhelming in most cases. Now, if a dog-faced man does enter your dwelling, God forbid, or another area of your structure, your property, do exercise caution. Quite often, they are armed. More than likely, they'll have a bow and arrow set or a crudely crafted spear or javelin. Cudgels are not unheard of either. Even if they are ostensibly unarmed, their claws are sharp, long, and most often manicured to a rapier point. Unarmed does not mean incapable of threat of violence. These creatures are also lightning quick. So, along with the caution based on potential weaponry you'll be facing if you attempt to confront a dog-faced man, confrontations are doubly discouraged based on the fact that, if something were to go sour, there is no way you'll be outrunning any of the cynocephali. One manner in which you might rouse them to anger is if you disturb their mating or family life. You see, to clarify further, dog-faced men does not refer to simply male cynocephaly. The men part is just like when someone denotes all of humanity as mankind. Dog-faced men include both male and female cynocephaly. The sex of the cynocephalus can be determined in the same manner as one generally can tell the gender of a Homo sapien. The female dog-faced men have breasts and female genitals, though both are generally obscured by tanned animal skins or linen clothing. Both the males and females have extremely furry tails that are quite noticeable even through the clothes. Many who have encountered the dog-faced men notice the tail before they fully realize that, from the neck up, the being they are stumbling across has fur, a stout neck, a long snout, fearsome teeth and jaws, and in general, long upstanding ears that have far better hearing than our own. That mentioning of clothing brings us to another point. The cynocephaly are not, repeat, not, utter brutes incapable of understanding a local language, incapable of reasoning or logic, and or incapable of complex higher-order thought. To think otherwise is a very dangerous misstep. These creatures do, indeed, clothe themselves, making the raiments themselves. As mentioned earlier, they arm themselves as necessary. Moreover, if they are capable of doing so, they like to keep domesticated livestock. Sheep are their favorite, with goats being a close second favorite. Larger domesticated livestock isn't generally their bag, but in a pinch, they'll take on cows, pigs, llamas, or other grander beasts. Additionally, their knowledge, though somewhat limited compared to the upper echelons of humanity, can be extremely extensive, as they have a great deal more time than your average human to learn, to experience, and to accumulate that knowledge. The average lifespan of a dog-faced man is 173 years. The extreme outliers of that average have the youngest dying around 150, and the oldest on record dying at a whopping 213. With this extended life, the cynocephaly can become experts at a great many things: pottery, land and livestock cultivation, language, the erotic arts, meat curing, and more. In regards to language, dog-faced men have often been known to be able to hold conversations in many languages, but that is the exception and not the rule. Most often, the odd dog-faced man that will be on your property will not be able to communicate verbally. Just like any other canid, the dog-faced man will probably attempt to communicate via sound through growls, whines, barks, snarls, whimpers, and panting. The cynocephaly that speak a human language generally stay with their packs and do not end up as one-offs on some poor schmuck's property. Still, try to calmly verbally address the cynocephalus on your property if you can find the courage to do so while simultaneously exercising caution and ensuring you either have a very fast way out, car, motorbike, etc., or are far enough away that you can get to a secure home or bunker or other fortified building, just in case. Before we conclude this introductory chapter, it is appropriate, necessary, and imperative that you make a note, yet again, not to try to rid yourself of the dog-faced man or to trap the creature. When cornered, the cynocephaly can become quite feral. As with any dog, wild or domesticated, they generally will bite and strike out of fear more often than malice. But you should be leery of any attempts at removal or capture without a trained professional with you. Furthermore, if you have done your research, you'll have most likely come across some interesting examples of curing cynocephaly of their non-humanness. The once popular folktale turned Christian canon turned apocryphal oddity that the Catholic Church wants nothing to do with, regarding the man named Reprobus, being cursed with cynocephaly as an affliction for fighting against the people and the will of the one true God, is one that many point to and say that a cure is possible, and that attempting to cure a dog-faced man is the best way to rid one's property of a cynocephalus. Even if this tale rang truer or had more veracious accounts or records attached to it, keep in mind that Jesus Christ himself was the healer of this man, Reprobus, and it's quite doubtful that any of us can cure much of anything, much less turn cynocephalus to literal quasi-divine saint. In short, stay away from trying to cure these beings. We are not miracle workers, people. That brings us to the end of the introduction to the first chapter of Downward Dog, Why Dog-Faced Men Frequent Your Property. Though we wandered and digressed a bit here and there, we here at Pensive Press hope that you've enjoyed the free excerpt and would love for you to purchase the text in full, as we believe it is the most comprehensive guide to clearing one's property of dog-faced men yet to be published. If, after reading this text, you still have issues with those dog-faced men, or maybe feel you've misidentified the creature taking up on, in, or near your property, consider some of our other how-to guides, starting with the follow-up companion text to Downward Dog, Why Dog-Faced Men Frequent Your Property, titled Charismaspi, Caniba, and Canina, an encyclopedic comparative guide for canine bipeds. Some other texts that might interest you are Embracing Your Ibur, Idolic Entropy, Embracing Disorder, Pesky Poltergeists and Why They Have Panache, Teaching Tantra, Spiritual Defense Through Meditation and Sexuality, Kissing Quetzalcoatl, Loving Lakshmi, and Shoving Shiva, a comprehensive guide to navigating spiritual encounters on this plane, a practitioner's tract on putting penis panic into practical magic, Minotaurs, Chimeras, and You, a self-help text for those attracted to above-average beasts. Whose Broomstick Is This? Walpurgis Night Do's and Don'ts? And many, many more. Best of luck with your dog-faced man, and thank you for choosing Downward Dog, Why Dog-Faced Men Frequent Your Property, from Pensive Press. Thank you for listening to Downward Dog, Why Dog-Faced Men Frequent Your Property. The backing track for this story was taken from the Free Music Archive and is titled I Am a Man Who Will Fight for Your Honor, from the album of the same name by Chris Zabriskie. It is being used under a Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 International License. Thank you yet again to Mr. Zabriskie for providing this music to the Free Music Archive, and thereby to the world. That does it for Prose this week. Please keep an eye out for more episodes coming to you next week from Ireland. As always, a very sincere thank you for listening to Prose. See you next week.